It's often pride that stops people because they sort of think that to be creative is something that's given to you. They don't realise that it's something that comes from within you. By acting on it, by bringing it out, you start to know it.
I'm excited to share this episode with Janet Laurence with you. She's a world-renowned Australian artist, and we talk about the role of her work, which is to bring emotion and awareness to the fragility of nature, with the aim that people are inspired to save their environments whilst they still can. You'll hear how Janet collaborates with scientists, botanists, writers, philosophers, and people from various fields who help the continuous opening up of her world and ours. We talk about how, having started out as a starving artist, Janet committed herself to her mission fully and now feels very fortunate that she can support herself with her work, which is in museums and galleries around the world, and she can live how she chooses to, exploring the topics that fascinate her. You're listening to Going Conscious, the podcast where we discover new ways to live a more conscious life of fulfillment and freedom. Each week, I speak with entrepreneurs, academics, and changemakers who have gone through big changes, left unfulfilling lives behind, and found meaning in this new world where purpose drives success. Let's get inspired to transform and unleash our unique journeys to the fullest. Let's explore the impact we want to make, challenge how we view our environments, and deepen our understanding of ourselves and this beautiful world around us. Live your freedom. I'm your host, Nikki Trott. In this episode, we talk about how Janet uses an aesthetic language that is desirable to engage with to bring the viewer closer to environmental topics. Janet explains how, having seen the devastating effect of human behaviour on nature herself, she sought out more fragile places to make work about, to look at the urgent need of healing them. Janet describes how she moves forward based on her intuition, confidence, and premonitions of herself in the future. We talk about the importance of the artist's voice and about well-being, how Janet connects with her environment deeply every morning through her meditative walk with her dog and a podcast. Listen to the end to hear about some of the books and podcasts that Janet loves at the moment. Now, let's go to our conversation. Janet, welcome to Going Conscious. I'm really happy to be speaking with you here.
Hi, Nikki. It's lovely to be connecting back with you too.
Janet is a world-renowned Australian artist examining our physical, cultural, and conflicting relationship to the natural world. She explores what it might mean to heal the natural environment and fuses this sense of communal loss with a search for connection with powerful life forces. Janet's work reminds us that art can provoke its audience into a renewed awareness about our environment. So welcome, Janet.
Thank you, Nikki.
I saw just yesterday, Janet, that you were awarded the 2020 Australian Antarctic Arts Fellowship. So congratulations. I was reading how you'll be creating an immersive installation after spending some time yourself in the Antarctic, and then bringing that back so that you can create an experience and people can understand more the fragility and power of the Antarctic. So we'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Well, it's a place I've always dreamed of going to, and I decided to apply for that fellowship. And of course, I'm so delighted because I've just heard that I received it. It is, of course, delayed because of COVID, so I won't be going there for another 15 months. But however, lots to look forward to there. And I'm also going to be very open to how I'm going to enable myself to experience it. So even though I've agreed that I will exhibit work when I return in certain museums, I'm not sure where it'll take me. And I think that's very exciting as an artist to have that possibility. I just Casey, the place I've selected, is also very well known for its wonderful mosses and lichens, as well as all the classic Antarctic experiences of ice and all the amazing animals and birds. So I think it's going to be a really, really extraordinary opening up for me.
Incredible. And how do you think you can bring people an experience of the fragility of the Antarctic then? I mean, I know you're keeping it open, but how as an artist can you help to make people more aware?
Well, I really believe that that's what art can do. It can bring the more emotional side of things to the fore. It can bring people into an intimate experience of things. It can use techniques and ways of making things or showing things or amplifying things. I use a lot of different mediums that enable that possibility. And so I feel it's very much the role of art is to feed us the soul, as it were, to feed the heart and the soul. So much of our life deprives us of those experiences. And so I think art is so important, and I mean art in all art forms. It's so important for keeping that alive, and that's a very human dimension. Not to say that a lot of other species don't have it as well, and I do believe actually other species look at birds and everything, they create sort of art in the service perhaps of sexuality and mating. But in fact, it's still an extraordinary length that they will go to that creates an emotional response to them. So I think it's all quite linked, actually. And I love having this role in life. I really love it. I've spent so long doing it that it's just a normal way for me to be thinking about things.
So how do you bring through your work an experience to people that helps them to understand more about what it might mean to heal the natural environment?
Well, one of the things I do quite intuitively, I think, is I use an aesthetic language that is quite desirable to engage with. And in doing that, I mean, it's a strategy painters have always used, or lots of artists have used that, because then you can often reveal something that's quite disturbing because you bring the viewer closer in to see it. You bring them in because they will engage, because it's desirable to look at. So what I do is I think along the lines of empathy. And I'm not really doing this like as a kind of a strategic way of behaving. It's just quite natural for me to try and want to share with someone an aspect, let's say, of the environment. And it's so hard to describe because it's actually never the same as the actual experience of something. It's really when you see something, and even seeing is often not enough, because art, and a lot of the art I do, it involves tactility, it involves often time, layers. When I say layers, I mean layers of transparency that lead into something. So you start seeing something not just as a visual, but you start to engage. Listening into something becomes very much a form of attention. So seeing, because it's also not just one thing itself, it's the relationship of different things together. And it's some things that are really true. It might be real data, let's say, of scientific data about states of the environment. But then it might be a very intimate portrait, let's say, of a tree, but there's something about it, the way it's done, that makes you look at it in a different way. It's all about trying to see things in a new way, try and bring attention to things. But I think empathy and aesthetics, a language of empathy and a language of aesthetics are natural tools for the artist. In my case, because I do want to show you this fragility, it's really necessary. I don't want to bombard with just a kind of a crashing bombardment of something, but I want to invite you in so that you feel about it. You have a sensation and you have an emotional response to it.
An emotional response. So how do you weave in empathy then? I was interested by your use of the word empathy.
Because let's just say I did a hospital for the Great Barrier Reef. Okay, that was my work for the Paris Climate Talks. It was situated in a natural history museum where they have all the, as you know, the beautiful specimens of all the creatures of the world. And I had it was a very illuminated little space that you would virtually enter into and walk around, and you would look into different wards like a hospital of all of these kind of states of coral and sea creatures. But there was a kind of almost a fantasy level of some of it, like some of the corals were embroidered with different coloured embroidery threads that spilled out as just threads, which becomes very much a metaphor for the colour leaving the coral, let's say. But it also has a tactility as a sculptural object that you start to engage with it. So it's something other than just a piece of coral with threads wrapped around it in a very particular way. Okay, so it's not like all over it and roughly done, but it's real beautifully wrapped, juxtaposed with a certain sort of little transparent photos of the sort of some of the beautiful photos, but just a close-up of the face of some of those beautiful, different sea aquatic animals that would live amongst the coral. So you start to build up a little story about the coral. So each ward becomes a different story about the different states of parts of the barrier reef. There was even like images of a kind of turtles, but turtles who are, suffering enormously with climate change and all the human occupation of all their habitat areas and nest laying beaches. And so they're very close up, but the turtles that I photographed are in a hospital and some of them are bandaged, and it's kind of really weird looking at a turtle with big head bandages on. I mean, it looks so weird. So there's that juxtaposed with other images of turtle in the water, juxtaposed with the kind of amazing seagrasses, the turtle world. And then there's also, they're sitting on like all this layer of tubing, which is kind of like, is it hospital tubing or is it all the plastic tubing that's left in the ocean? I mean, it's not really specific what it is, but I just find myself like a poet who sort of puts words together to create meaning and a story in a verse. I just find that I do that. I just want to put things together to tell a story. And so ward by ward, the hospital for the barrier reef was built up. And it's then lit in a way that casts big shadows onto the ground. And there's also video projected right beside it and even catching onto it in parts. And so I guess it's just within the museum, it's a sort of totally different sort of place that naturally people want to go over to because it has a kind of strange, eerie lighting to it. So right from the very distant viewing of it, you are attracted like a moth to light. You move over to it and engage with all this detail and stories. And it's also like it forms a wunderkammer. And as you know, when you look at a wunderkammer, you start looking at all of these details. And when they were originally done, in the 18th century or, they were put together by species and so on. But as an artist, I'm putting them together in my way of trying to tell stories about them. But instead of putting them together as the wonders of nature, that's inherently there in their being, but I'm putting them together as this incredible deranged nature. It's deranged. It's all wrong. And the same as in the films that are playing, the corals all desaturated of colour, and the little creatures have got, I've just turned the film into negative form so that the colours are all quite disturbed. And you just pick it up straight away that this is something wrong with that. But it's still very beautiful. So you still want to look at it. And the other thing is to say about this thing with empathizing with, you look very intimately at these little creatures that normally you never see. I mean, if you're, diving or snorkeling, you can see them, but you don't see them that close up. But when you, with the photograph that you start to focus in and enlarge a particular part, you can reveal their face, their eyes, their relationship to their young or whatever, things that you give them the sentience they have. You reveal it. So suddenly creatures that you never thought you could really feel empathy with, you can by being given this opportunity to see it.
So what's the effect then that you want this work to have on the people who engage with it?
Because I don't think you can act for something unless you really love it and care for it. So how can we, in this case it was the barrier reef, how can we fight for the barrier reef if we really had no knowledge of it or don't really know what it means? So the art can bring to people this extraordinary place and what is happening there, the depth of life, the diversity of life that's totally threatened by climate change. And so I believe that the art is this vehicle for bringing that to people on an intimate level. Whereas, the scientist might give, the huge, amazing talk about the issues, the facts, the numbers, all the data, etc. But it gives information, but not necessarily an emotional response in order to act. I do believe that you need to care for something in order to act. And that's what I want. I want to change things. And so you have to change the people around you to understand the importance of caring for our world, what they stand to lose.
So were you always pursuing a conscious and environmental direction with your work, or is that something that changed at some point for you in the past?
I was always interested in looking intimately at nature and using art as a way to explore it. It gives you the reason to go and, draw something in absolute detail. It gives you the reason to go in close and focus on things. And then by looking closely at things, you begin to realize the relationship between things and you see the whole pattern and you understand the ecological connections between things. So, of course, associated with all the research that you're doing at the same time. But I was sort of making these artworks as spaces to bring people into looking at the wonder and the beauty of nature. But I think the first time I went to a site of devastation of nature, of man destroying the forests in Chiapas, and seeing the effect on the indigenous people there and their whole lifestyle gone, and the terrible effects it has on the whole social system there. And watching that firsthand and realizing that I've been invited there as an artist to make a work about the destruction of these forests. And I felt, my God, it's so important to record this. This is so important to speak up about it. And ever since then, I sought out more fragile places to make work about because I felt that it was more urgently needed. And I still had the same approach at looking at, for example, a most beautiful forest being destroyed. but the work becomes much more about a lament, about a terrible recognition of the loss or what will be lost, rather than just a celebration of nature. So it's quite a different position.
So moving from a celebration of nature to then really looking at what we can lose and making people aware of that and the fragility that surrounds it.
Exactly.
Was the moment that you made that transition, was it when you first saw that man-destroyed forest? Was that what caused you to make that shift, or was there something else as well?
Well, I got invited there by an American organization who was trying to do work in this forest to preserve the life of the Indigenous people with what was happening. Obviously, because they picked up that I would be interested in seeing this remarkable forest that was about to be lost. But it was when I was there that I was so disturbed about what was happening, and I took back a lot of evidence in the sort of work I did there, and it became very much a huge project for me. And it certainly led me to say, well, gosh, look what's happening in Australia with our forests in Tasmania. So I set out to the forests here to record exactly what was happening in the Styx forest and the Tarkine forest, where I've done a lot of work. And then after that, I sought out organisations like Fauna and Flora International to go and work with their biologists in Aceh and have a look after the devastation of the monsoon and how they were dealing with that. That was like, climate change disaster, but also, with all the fighting that had gone on, the whole devastation of their environment. And so I sort of sought out particular places, but also always with the hope of talking about the possibilities of healing, because I guess that's why I made a lot of the works like hospitals. And, for example, Aceh was a perfect example of that, where I did a big work afterwards, because after that whole monsoon and the total devastation, the people themselves turned around and knew that they had to start to repair their land. And so Fauna and Flora International worked with them on a lot of these programs. And so that was an amazing thing to actually witness that sort of how man starts to care for the land and care for things that have been so devastated. It's another whole aspect that came into the work. And, so always going with scientists to visit places, you're always seeing what the scientists are trying to do, but you're also witnessing the horrors of what climate change has done, and man, total outright destruction by man, still ongoing in a massive way, of course, and there's lots to be done. But yeah, I feel that's where I'm at with my work, on trying to find the places that I really relate to, obviously, that I know that I love that environment and will want to work with it.
So once people have engaged with your work and they have felt moved or touched, how do you then want them to act? What are you hoping for the actions to be based off those affected people?
Yeah, well, that's sort of very interesting, because I guess the first thing you're doing is often you're really informing people about something and making them feel concerned about it. And there are so many avenues for people where they can act, once they're aware of something. And in many of my exhibitions, there have in fact been lots of information, links and things of organizations where they can do work, or they can sign up, or, that they can follow through. I think I've got a project coming up, which I'm just working on, which is not just my artwork. It's just, I felt very moved to do it because I was so disturbed by the devastating bushfires we had here, which of course you were here for. But I was so disturbed about the loss of 3 billion animals, insects and birds and, reptiles, everything. So devastated. And all the plants, billions of plants. And I felt that all of the attention was going into the politics of cleaning up and getting houses rebuilt and, building back the services and everything, all very important to do. But somehow with COVID came the inability to continue the outpouring of grief about the animals. And it was an enormous grief that was felt. And I wanted to do this work. I don't mean just my artwork, but I do think of the whole thing as an artwork, what I want to do. It's in a very beautiful place in Sydney called the Paddington Reservoir Gardens, which is a kind of sunken garden and a beautiful old reservoir, which has sort of almost got a cathedral-like feeling inside with columns, and it's a huge, big space, and with this courtyard garden beside it. And I wanted to enable it to become like a sort of sacred space so people could enter into this. And I want to have a requiem stroke reckoning for the bushfires and the loss of all the plants and animals. And it's all charging ahead. And there is so many people who want to become, and organisations who want to actually contribute to it, because there is this severed sort of grief that people haven't been able to feel because of COVID for all this loss. So this is what I'm working on at the moment. It's one of the things, just one of the things, but I'm incorporating musicians, performers, a nursery of plants, poets, scientific and philosophical speakers, and artworks as well. And so it's quite a very holistic sort of space, which will embrace the possibility of, creating a big lament. But I sort of see it all as one big artwork that encompasses all that I have to try and hold together as a very special sacred space.
It sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it's really coming along. I mean, it's happening in January, which will be the anniversary of the bushfires, and it's happening under the umbrella of the Sydney Festival. And I've just got the most amazing, a lot of Indigenous poets and we have Indigenous burning systems. I mean, there's just so many great people that will be involved with it. And I don't know, I just sort of see it very much as this need for acknowledging, that this huge loss, and acknowledging a love that we have that we need to nurture, because otherwise we'll let it all be destroyed. So I don't know. I just hope it's all right. It's bigger than anything I've done before in terms of, incorporating such a diversity of people involved.
If you're enjoying Going Conscious, please do subscribe to the show and get a new episode every Wednesday. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. I love to hear what you think, and your support means so much. For all episodes, show notes, and more, visit goingconscious.com. As well as hosting Going Conscious, I help conscious entrepreneurs and changemakers to build their personal power, align with their purpose, and thrive in times of transition in business and relationships. You can find out more about my group program, one-on-one transformational life coaching, and bespoke conscious consulting offering through my website, nikkitrott.com, or on Instagram @nikkitrott. I'd love to hear from you and to talk about how I can help you on your path of personal growth too. Let's stay in touch. So, I'm wondering, with all of this awareness and experience of the environment and environmental destruction and fragility that you're being exposed to through your work, what effects has that had on you personally as well?
Well, I don't. I don't dwell in a total despair because I have to act with hope. For me, action creates hope. But on the other hand, I don't think you can act without hope. So I feel like I'm quite motivated to do this work because I do believe in the possibility for having an effect, having a change, or not. I mean, it's not going to change the real political situation. I know that, but it is going to make changes. And sometimes it's just, I just know from experience, it's just sort of a whole lot of kids that come and thank you, and and you see their future projects in school being done based on a work they've seen of yours, or the beautiful letters that I get that I know has had effects on people, and that leads to something. And I have to act within that. I'm not, I mean, I have a life as well, but my life is sort of bound up in caring for the environment, but also I have a garden, which I think is also a part of caring for the environment. I think the smallest gesture can be that sometimes. I think if everybody just planted a tree and cared for it. In fact, that's one of the projects in this Requiem will be a little nursery of all the of tiny tube stock trees of being planted by the Botanic Gardens to try and regenerate the lost forests of all the trees that were burnt. And I'll be giving them away to people to grow that tree. So they take away something of the burnt forest and then they nurture it. And it will also give them something back because, as you know, when you care for anything, you also are given something back by the act of caring, by giving out. And so I think that can happen with just caring for something and letting something grow like a plant. So they're small and intimate gestures, but they can lead to a bigger thing. And I'll have 500 little trees. So if it's 500 people doing that, it's something, I think. For art, it's something for art to do.
Beautiful. So I love what you say about how everyone gets something back from the act of caring. Is that something that you experience in your own garden?
Very much so. In fact, I was just in a recent artwork that came out of London from the Serpentine Gallery, and it was called Do It. And here it was a Caldor project, and artists were asked to come up with a Do It project. And mine was stroke a leaf until you feel it stroking you back. And people felt that not many people before had really stroked and touched a leaf, but you feel the cellular structure of the leaf, feels the cellular structure of your fingers, and you make a connection. And that little act of caring and giving returns that to you. It's like if you smile at someone and they smile at you back. It's like these tiny gestures, I believe, are very important. And I think, again, art can deal with these intimate things, can use them. So
I'm going to have to try that, to stroke a leaf until I feel it stroking me back.
yeah, if you saw on the Instagram, even on my Instagram, of gently stroke a living leaf and feel it stroking you back. Yes, try it. Please do.
I will. I'll let you know how I get on.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, with your journey towards more and more conscious work, environmental work, what does personal success look like to you? And also, how has this changed for you maybe over from the beginning of your career to now?
Yeah, well, I find that a difficult question probably to answer because I don't sit back and think about it very much. I'm sort of always in action, as it were. I'm never sitting back thinking, how successful have I been or not? I certainly get a sense that what I'm doing is worthwhile and it's engaged with, and it's offering me a whole way to invent my life. It charges me to keep going, but I do get a really good response, and it creates dialogue, and it creates, some people wanting to do a book about it, and, lots of things like that, and amazing, opportunities to collaborate or dialogue with philosophers or writers or gardeners or people of different fields, because they connect with what you're doing. And so that my world continues to open up enormously. I feel, for me, that feels successful, or it feels right. It certainly feels like it's going somewhere. I don't ever feel I'm stopping still, but I also feel I'm someone who has continued to invent my life as I go along with what I need to do, So if I really was at a stalemate, if there was nothing, I mean, I do get invited to do a lot. I mean, more and more, funnily enough, because especially as climate change has become a real thing for artists to work with, I'm asked to do quite a lot of things, and some I can or can't do, or haven't got time. I mean, it sounds, and so there's an enormous richness that comes with that, with the sort of projects I get involved in and the sort of worlds I'm able to enter. So it feels very rich, my life. It feels very rich. I mean, a commercial banker is going to stand outside and not have any comprehension of that. But I don't really, I'm not, there's another world there. I mean, at the same time, what I'm doing, it supports me. It supports itself. It's not like it's, I can, so it sounds really weird to say I'm not like presenting myself as a starving artist, but I have been in the past when I first started making art. Of course, I committed myself to doing it, and with I was really totally committed. It didn't worry me that I had to struggle a lot to survive, to doing different things, but always finding things I liked doing to survive. But now I feel really fortunate that I can support myself through my own work, and I have been able to for quite a long time.
So you mentioned that you are inventing your life. So how do you know what you need to do as you move forward with inventing your life?
I honestly can say it's so much like sometimes you have a strange premonition of yourself in a future, or sometimes, but I don't set out and strategize like that. But there's sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I can see myself that not exactly where I'm going, but knowing that there's a whole lot out there that I'm still really wanting to embrace and work with. And I just know that I'll be able to. I have the confidence, I suppose, to know that I can do what I want to do, what I really feel, because I feel really committed to it, and I feel confident that I can manage it. It sounds sort of odd. It's very intuitive how I move on from things, how I move along. One thing is totally related to the other. There's a very continuous, very holistic way of my, way of working. And one thing starts to connect to another, and then from that one rolls out another, like a big rolling ball of grass. It just keeps going on. And I feel, that quite confident that I can handle that. I mean, one never knows, of course. I mean, we live in such uncertainty at the moment, but I'm not letting that uncertainty, I'm sort of quite embracing that, quite frankly. I'm not letting that really disturb me. Of course, we're all a bit devastated with the state we're living under at the moment, but I'm not flattened by that. I just know that I can keep going and keep doing things. And if one thing gets delayed or cancelled, there's something else to go on with, and so on. I move forward. I feel I'm moving forward, but not in that it's not really so linear, but it's more, it fills out like a round ball. It gets bigger.
So you feel your intuition or your premonition, and then with your commitment and your confidence, you're able to move towards it, and it just keeps growing very naturally.
Yes, I feel that. Yeah.
And what does it feel like? What does it feel like when you connect with that intuition and premonition?
It just feels like you knowing and you're connecting in a very broad way. Yeah. It just feels, I don't know, I feel very connected into the living world.
Is there anything that you do to help you to feel more and more connected with the living world?
Well, I spend time within it, but I think it feeds itself in a funny way. The way I work, the sort of the research I do isn't like I set out like in a drudgery way to learn about something. I'm there because I'm loving learning about it. I'm loving this knowledge I'm getting about something. And it just somehow starts to live within you, that knowledge. And somehow it gets called upon when you work. You know, you find yourself remembering sometimes things, or, you know, it just lives inside you. And so, yeah, I just feel that I'm very, connected. Of course, I do things like trying to still myself, and every morning I walk and I do my yoga, but I don't sort of feel I'm doing those things in order to try and help that. I just feel it's, again, something I want to keep a sense of well-being about with myself. And it is a type of meditation, my walk. If I don't do it, I'm much more agitated. I know that. And I keep very aware of my well-being in other ways too, in my diet, in my, in my whole lifestyle.
What are the other important parts of your well-being routine?
Well, I mean, the obvious things are to say is about one's diet, mainly plant foods, but I love going inside the plant even. And what does that plant bring? And you see, because I've had that opportunity of working with plants, with botanists on understanding sometimes, not like a gardener so much as, you know, what one plant will do with another, but I love understanding the biochemical nature of plants too, and understanding what certain plants will do for you, your body, and our connection to the world through plants. And so, and I also feel I love being involved with animals to take me into their way of perceiving the world as well. And I know it sounds completely ridiculous and corny, but I sort of love the sort of conversations that I can have with a plant, or that I can have with animals that you have the opportunity to get to know. Well, let's say my dog, for example, on a daily walk will take me into certain places and groups of trees and then I'm thinking, yeah, what's happening here? And like, I don't know, I just sort of love being able to enter into those worlds. And so at the same time, I might be listening to a podcast that's, you know, very much about the life of certain birds or something. And so suddenly you're in this amazing forest listening to all of that as well. And I kind of like this enormity of this living world, that somehow you can be within it while I'm having my walk. It doesn't sound very meditative, but it kind of is.
It does. It does sound meditative. I completely understand. I'm such a huge fan of walking daily in nature myself, and I do count it as part of my meditation practice in a way. I know exactly what you mean, where you can just really connect, and that connection and observation brings you so much into your presence in that moment.
Exactly, yeah. And it's quite tantalizing, it enlivens you.
So, Janet, as we come to the end of our conversation today, is there anything that comes into your mind as a key takeaway or something you want to share?
I mean, I didn't mention, of course, relationships with people are so important, to share a lot of this knowledge. It's so important maintaining those special relationships. I feel I'm really fortunate to be able to live like this. I feel I don't really believe in that an artist is just a talented person at all, and that's what it's all about. I'm not into that kind of mythology of the artist. I just feel that the artist, being an artist, gives you a way of seeing the world and presenting it. And I think that the more you do it, the more you're able to live in that world and embrace it, and it becomes bigger, I think. And I feel that working as an artist at this moment in time, at this really critical moment, I think it's a state of emergency we're in, I feel it's important. And, I don't think I'm a naturally egotistical sort of person that's, wanting to embrace my importance. I'm just saying that I think it's important that art can speak, and that art has a voice, and the artist's voice is really important in this world that's trying to drown out so much. Yeah.
One last thing that I'm thinking about that I would love to ask you is, how do you see creativity as a path to spirituality within every person?
Oh, I think it's an enormous possibility for people to find that, if they have the opportunity, if they will give themselves that space. So many people will never be able to do that because they can't. They just are unable to. It's like, they talk about the sort of the other hemisphere of the brain. I do believe that it is very much, a lot of that is true, and but I think that people who've worked in a really totally practical, like an accountant or something, I do feel that they're going to have a lot of problem to enable themselves to listen to something in themselves and to start that creativity. It's often a pride that stops people, because they sort of think that to be creative is something that's given to you. They don't realize that it's something that comes from within you, and that you have to, by acting, by bringing it out, you start to know it and you can start to live with it. And I think it's possible for everyone to have that. I mean, look at children, and then it gets all squashed, and everybody, pragmatism takes over people's lives, and the obsession about making money, and the obsession about fitting in and being, trying to be so-called normal. And, I think that those are things that inhibit people from wanting to just open up and allow them to feel that within them and to nurture it. But I think that the more people that have that, I think the world would be a much better place.
I completely agree with you, Janet. So one last question. I know how much you love books. Is there anything you've read recently and loved that you can recommend to us?
Well, I'm reading about 5 books at the moment, but one of them is Robert Macfarlane's The Underlying. Yeah, I love his books anyway. And I also love Rebecca Solnit, her books. There's always so many. You suddenly can't think. I'm reading a beautiful book by Greg Borschmann called The People's Forest. That's really much more of a whole history of an Australian history, actually, of our whole forest movements. Right through from Indigenous stories of forests, right through. And I'm reading another book of one man who's lived in forests, experiences of them, called Wild Places, as he moves through these different forests. So none of those are novels. And it's a while since I've read a novel, I have to confess. Somehow I find that the real world's bigger than the novels, but I've always loved Siebel's novels, and they always surprise me that they are, in fact, fiction, because they don't feel like fiction. But I think Rings of Saturn was a book I just absolutely adored, like a Bible. And gosh, there's, yeah.
That's a lot. That's
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
No, they sound amazing. There's a lot to get stuck into there. Yeah, I'd love to explore Rings of Saturn, and Wild Places sounds really interesting.
I know. I listen to heaps of podcasts too, which I find amazing.
What are your favorite podcasts?
Oh, well, I love there was one called Conversations with different people, and I pick conversations I really love. And then there's another one I choose that I'll always go to that's really like a nature one that's called Off Track. They're Australian; those are very Australian ones. But I do like a lot of like the art angle gives a whole lot of stories about art.
But that's great to hear how you love to listen to so many podcasts as well, and to enjoy learning that way too, as do I, of course. That's what finds us here. So to close, where can we find you online, Janet? Where's the best place for listeners to find you?
Well, I have my website, which I confess needs a bit of updating, and Vimeo. Just my website's just www.janetlawrence.com. And then I have an Instagram, which is just Janet Laurence. That really goes to Facebook as well. I have an activist group called Dirt Witches. We meet, and we've got a bit of a Instagram site, but not a lot happening in the Instagram aspect of it. We're so busy plotting amazing kind of performative environmental acts. And I guess there's things on YouTube and just there's quite a few things that come out of museum shows. So they're all there somewhere on the net. There's quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I've really enjoyed our discussion today, Janet. Thank you so much. And I look forward to speaking again soon, and wish you all the best down under in your lockdown.
In our isolated world down here. Oh,
exactly. I'm glad we can still connect through it.
No, it's lovely that we can connect like that. I'm loving being connected to Europe. I mean, it's so much in my mind all the time. I know it so well. It's part of my world, and I can't just. It's once you know something and someone and a place and an environment, it still lives in you. And so I can see exactly where you are in Brandenburg.
We look forward to seeing you over in Europe soon enough, Janet.
Yeah. Okay, I hope so soon. Yeah. Okay, lovely to talk to you, Nikki.
You too. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Janet Laurence. Her Requiem project, or Reckoning for the Bushfires, which has been fueled by her disturbance about the loss of billions of animals and plants in the bushfires in Australia, sounds very moving. I look forward to seeing how she will work with many disciplines to create a special experience that acknowledges the great loss that has been incurred and gives people a space to grieve and to love. I really liked Janet's idea around stroking a leaf until it strokes you back. A lovely example of how the care that you put out into the world is given back to you. We can all try this small and simple act with a leaf and explore the balance and love we invite into our lives when we care for others. As Janet said, even the tiniest of gestures of care are very important. Our conversation also led me to reflect on the creativity that lies within every person. We all have the opportunity to nurture and open our creativity should we choose to take notice and to listen. Once we do, we can unlock profound wisdom and connection to our path and purpose. I love the idea that when we are creative, we are allowing the universe to flow through us, and there is so much there for us to learn. This builds our ability to be present and to understand and connect with the guidance we get, which feels like a pull in our gut. As Janet said, if more people connected with their creativity, the world would surely be a much better place. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe now and leave a 5-star review. It means so much more to me than you realize. Aside from podcasting, I coach and consult conscious entrepreneurs and changemakers to help them build their personal power, align with their purpose, and guide them to excel in times of transition in business and relationships. I work with one-on-one clients and run a group program too. To find out more and stay up to date on my coaching, podcasting, and inspiration, you can find me on Instagram at Nikki Trott, that's NIKKITROTT, or on my website, nikkitrott.com. I'd love to hear from you, and you can DM me on Instagram or email me through my website if you have any questions or comments or want to find out about working with me. See you next Wednesday on the next episode of Going Conscious. And until then, live your freedom.